It was Christmas Eve, 1945. A thick blanket of snow covered the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, muffling the world in a quiet hush. Inside the two-story timber house of the Sodder family, the air was filled with a different kind of sound. The excited chatter of children, the rustle of wrapping paper, the promise of a joyful Christmas morning to come. But as the evening wore on and the children drifted off to sleep, a sinister silence was preparing to descend upon their home, a silence that would last a lifetime. That night a fire, fierce and impossibly fast, would consume their house. It would erase everything, or so it seemed. In the frantic, smoke-filled chaos, George and Jennie managed to escape with 4 of their children, but 5 of them, the 5 who were sleeping in the upstairs attic rooms, trapped. By morning the house was nothing but a smoldering pit of ash and blackened timbers, but a horrifying question soon began to claw its way out of the ashes. A question that would turn a tragic accident into one of America's most enduring and chilling mysteries. Today we're diving into one of America's most chilling disappearing acts, the unsolved mystery of the Sodder children. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, delivered the official, heartbreaking verdict. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, Betty had perished in the blaze. The fire, he explained, had been so intensely hot that it had completely cremated their bodies, leaving nothing behind to be found. No bones, no teeth, not a single fragment. It was a neat, if gruesome, explanation. But for George and Jennie Sodder, it was an impossible one. They knew their children. They knew their house. Something was terribly wrong. A series of strange events leading up to that night painted a much darker picture. And as the days turned into weeks, the parents' grief began to transform into a steely conviction. Their children were not dead. They had not burned in that fire. They had been taken. And so began a search that would span decades. A desperate quest for answers that would haunt a family and captivate a nation for generations to come. To understand the depth of the mystery, you first have to understand the family at its heart. George Sodder was an Italian immigrant, arriving in America when he was just a boy of 13. He built his life from the ground up. A hard worker, respected, outspoken. He was fiercely proud of his heritage, yet openly critical of Benito Mussolini. His wife Jennie was the daughter of a local storekeeper, kind, devoted, the warm center of their bustling household. By 1945 they had 10 children, and their large 2-story house on Route 16 was a landmark. The loss becomes so much more profound when you know who was lost. The 5 children who slept in the attic that night were not just names on a list. They were vibrant young souls. The oldest of the 5 was 14-year-old Morris. He often helped with his father's trucking business. Next was 12-year-old Martha. She loved to read and was an excellent student. Then came 9-year-old Louis. Louis was the inquisitive one, always tinkering with things. And 8-year-old Jennie. Jennie was the artist of the family. She loved to draw. The youngest was little Betty, only 5 years old. Betty was cheerful and energetic. The night of the fire, it was these older children who, excited by new toys, begged to stay up past bedtime. Jennie, exhausted from a long day, agreed and reminded them to shut off the lights and lock the doors before they came up to bed. She took the youngest, Sylvia, upstairs and went to sleep herself, trusting her older children to be responsible. It was a simple, maternal decision, the kind made in loving homes every night, but it was a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her days. It was around midnight when Jennie Sodder was jolted from her sleep. On the other end of the line was a woman whose voice she didn't recognize. The woman asked for a name Jennie had never heard before, her speech punctuated by what sounded like faint laughter and the clinking of glasses. She switched off the lights, locked the door, and assumed the other children were safely tucked in their beds upstairs. At around 1 a.m., Jennie was awakened again, this time by a strange thud on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. She would only be asleep for another 30 minutes before the smell of smoke, thick and acrid, would pull her from her bed for the final, horrifying time. Her husband's office, the room directly below, was on fire. Panic seized her. Once outside in the freezing night air, the terrible reality crashed down on them. They were 6. 5 children were still inside, trapped in the attic rooms directly above the heart of the inferno. The main staircase was already a column of fire, completely impassable. George ran to the side of the house. This was where he always kept his large, heavy extension ladder. The ladder was gone. He found it 75 feet away, thrown into a gully. Someone had moved it. He tried his 2 large coal trucks. Both, which worked the day before, were inexplicably inoperable. His water barrel, kept for small fires, was frozen solid. The fire department, located only 2.5 miles away, did not appear on the scene until 8 a.m. the next morning. By the time help arrived, there was nothing left to save. The grand 2-story house was reduced to a smoldering pit of ash. Fire Chief F.J. Morris offered his grim assessment with a troubling finality. He told the heartbroken parents that the fire had been so intensely hot that it had cremated the bodies of their 5 children, leaving absolutely no trace behind. But Jennie, in her own research, spoke with an employee at a local crematorium who confirmed her worst fears. It was simply not possible for 5 skeletons to vanish without a trace in a house fire. If sturdy metal appliances had survived the blaze, surely the children's bones should have as well. The absence of remains was not an answer, it was the question itself, and it led the parents to a chilling conclusion. Their children were not dead, they had been taken. Suddenly, strange occurrences weren't just odd coincidences, they were clues in a horrifying puzzle of abduction. The fire, they began to believe, was not the tragedy itself, it was a diversion, a massive, fiery magic trick designed to make 5 children disappear forever. A coroner's inquest was shockingly brief, ruling the fire an accident, and that the 5 children had died. When Chief Morris issued 5 death certificates, George Sodder refused to accept them. Without remains, he saw it as a bureaucratic attempt to sweep a crime under the rug. Frustrated by the lack of official action, George took matters into his own hands and began to excavate the rubble himself. He made a strange discovery: what a local minister suggested might be a human heart, baked hard by the fire. Later, a funeral director told him it was almost certainly a beef liver, unharmed by the fire. Another dead end. Convinced of a cover-up, the Sodders hired a private investigator, C.C. Tinsley. He soon uncovered a series of disturbing facts. Tinsley learned that Morris had allegedly confessed to a minister that he had staged the discovery of the heart with a beef liver, hoping to convince the family the children were dead so they'd stop searching. Tinsley also found a witness who claimed he saw someone throwing what looked like balls of fire onto the Sodder roof just before the blaze. This was not faulty wiring, this was arson. A darker, more organized motive began to emerge from the shadows: the mafia. George recalled an insurance salesman who, after being refused, warned, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed." The Sodders learned that same man had served on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident. The theory gained traction. Perhaps George, with his successful business and anti-Mussolini views, had refused to cooperate with organized crime. This would explain the meticulous planning, and the bizarre silence from local authorities, who may have been intimidated or bribed. In the years after, a string of baffling sightings kept hope alive. A woman at a tourist stop claimed she served the children breakfast on Christmas morning with 2 men and 2 women of Italian extraction. Years later, a hotel worker in Charleston recalled seeing 4 of the children a week after the fire, arriving late at night with a wealthy-looking group. Perhaps the most detailed sighting was in a Texas bar, where a young man claiming to be Louis Sodder frantically tried to tell his story before being hurried away. Then in 1967, 2 decades after the fire, a single piece of mail arrived that reignited the entire mystery. Inside was a photograph of a young man. The resemblance to her son Louis, who would have been in his late 20s, was uncanny. On the back, a cryptic message was scrawled, its meaning impossible to decipher. The Sodders hired another private investigator to trace the letter, but after taking their money, he vanished without a trace. In 1952, George erected a monument to his family's hope. Along the busy stretch of Route 16, he put up a large, stark billboard. It became a local landmark, a constant public reminder that the Sodder family would never give up. He meticulously maintained it for the rest of his life, a ritual of hope and a physical manifestation of his ongoing search. George went to his grave in 1969, a year after receiving the photograph, his lifelong quest ending without an answer. Jennie lived for another 20 years, never wavering in her belief that one day, her children would return. The heavy torch of the search was passed down to the surviving Sodder children, and to their children. Sylvia, the youngest, who has no memory of her lost siblings, has dedicated her life to honoring their memory and seeking the truth. Decades have passed, yet the central mystery remains. What truly happened inside that house as the flames consumed it? 3 primary theories endure: a tragic accident, a personal abduction, or a wider conspiracy orchestrated by the mafia. The fire has gone out long ago, but the embers of the mystery still glow, casting long shadows of doubt on that dark, silent night. Now I have a question for you. Do you believe the Sodder children perished in the fire, or do you believe they were kidnapped and lived on?